يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, very happy to be here. MashaAllah. If you can't tell, if you haven't noticed, I'm much more relaxed. This was the start of winter break. So, although we have to do a few exercises just to make sure that my son retains, what we've learned to this point, no full 6.5, 7 hour days of school. So I'm much more easygoing and relaxed. If you guys want to talk about favorite holiday movies, and I'm here for that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but Bismillah, I saw that in the lead up to class today. Um, uh, oh, okay, you know what? Tell him he's not gonna get this watch back. The parenting doesn't stop. But in any event, let me close my door. Yeah, in any event, I saw in the lead up to class, folks were interested in talking about LGBTQI issues. And it was interesting because I have a lot of ideas, about this issue. And I think the first thing, Run, how is my sound? Is the sound pretty good?
Yeah, you sound clear to me, very clear.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I'm using the mic. I have the mic.
Very fancy.
I have a lot of ideas about this this issue. The first thing is, I converted to Islam, about almost 22 years ago. And if you would have told me then that 20 years from today, one of the axial issues in the community, one of these real hot button issues, one of these really controversial issues in the community would be the stance that Muslims take vis-a-vis people that identify as gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, interested, and I'm blanking in terms of the the different words that are represented by the acronym. I would have told you, no way, never in a million. Yeah, I'm sure that the community would be dealing with something, but I wouldn't have imagined that it would be this. And I think it is a very controversial issue for a number of reasons, some of which are completely out of our control. Religious conservatism in this country, is a very, religious, American religious conservatism, if you were going to put it on trial, it would be very easy to convict. Religious conservatism has participated, and if you wanted to acquit, American religious practice, although I wouldn't give it the label conservatism, you might be able to do that as well. I mean, it was religious conservatives that religious people that led the civil rights movement, religious people that led the abolitionist movements. It was religious folks that led the movement for women's suffrage, religious folks that have always been at the forefront of advocating on behalf of poor and working class people. So you have both of those, but you have a self-identified American religious conservatism that has been quite complicit in a number of gross miscarriages of justice, that have endorsed social inequality, inequity, and have engaged in the outright dehumanization of many different kinds of people. And so I think it's very natural for Muslims being raised and growing in this particular religious milieu, to think that, okay, because there are statements in my religious tradition, there are stories that have been traditionally interpreted in my scripture that are critical of same sexual activity, because there's a natural discomfort with things that are strange, unusual, or, to use the correct term in this context, queer. Will I end up being guilty of the same kinds of, I guess, dehumanizing and negating another person's right to exist and be as they are, as some religious people in the history of this country, and by extension, the history of Western Europe, have traditionally done. And so I think that a lot of this conversation about, LGBTQ, issues, it brings us face to face with kind of a question about what it means to be a traditional practicing religious Muslim. And if some of that traditional identity, or some of that traditional religious practice, or some of my views seem to be critical of certain groups or certain kinds of people, is that in and of itself a violation of my commitment to civil society? Is that a violation of my commitment to civics? Is it a violation of my commitment to pluralism? Is it a violation of my commitment to conviviality, etc.? And one of those things, and one of the things that I think about that is that, Muslims have to recognize that, it's strange that these debates have never occurred in Muslim societies. Never. This is not a debate that you've always had homosexuality and different, expressions of transgenderism, queer identity, that has always been a part of Muslim societies from the inception of Muslim society. However, what I find strange, or what I find a little different, or it could just be delayed, right? Many of the people, and we know them, Abu Nawas, and some of them were known poets, right? We know who they were. They were much more content with a kind of marginality. Like, they were much more content being on the fringes of society. They were much more content existing, right? They existed as they existed. And a lot of those communities, if you get into some of this history, and it's there if you want to explore, these were communities that were known. People knew that they existed. People knew that those gatherings took place, and all sorts of untoward things took place in those gatherings. But ironically, nobody pursued them, right? There was no attempt made to scandalize these people, and we have to make their stories front page news, and their moral turpitude, which is the correct term, or their immorality is a threat to our communal existence. That kind of witch hunting did not exist, right? You just don't see any evidence of that. It was kind of like, okay, we have such persons that interact with us in certain ways, and they have their own enclaves in other ways. And there was a kind of détente, which is a French term that just means, like, there was a kind of understanding that, hey, that's that and this is this. And I find that with that kind of separation, you had a community of people who, yes, I view that community, and I'm saying this intentionally, sympathetically, was trying to figure itself out. Hey, look, I have feelings, I have emotions, I have inclinations, I have desires, um, many of which are not acceptable to my religious tradition, not acceptable to the people of my cultural background. And the fact that I have a space in which I can negotiate all of that, I think they would view that as probably the most that they could ask for. That there's a spot from which I can negotiate all of that, and trying to and even, don't repeat this because this could get me in some trouble. All right, because people might feel as though I'm being overly sympathetic. Even their existence being something that reminds all of us that there are things about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we don't understand, right? That their existence reminds us, there's some things that, we just don't have an analog for them in our understanding or in our tradition, or however, they never sought to actively replace or to supplant or to uproot or to deracinate. They never sought to actively kind of change the core ethos of Islamic civilization and culture so that they would become centered in that culture. So that you won't see them attempting to kind of offer novel interpretations of scripture. Like you don't see that from Abu Nawas and some of these other poets. They're much more content with this almost, rock and roll spirit of, we are the people on the outside of society that your conventional understandings of reality don't really account for. And we revel in that, in being that. And I think that they could revel in being that because being on that outside of kind of the core ethos of their societies did not mean being hunted, being tried, being killed, being lynched. It didn't mean that. And I think that America is a place where I think everyone wants to get to the center. And even in when we speak, we talk about centering Black people, centering women, because I think for the vast majority of us, if you were on the margin, that meant being exposed to premature death. That meant being dehumanized, to be marginalized, meant being dehumanized, right? It meant that your life valued less, right? That your life mattered less. So, I think the whole, the impetus of, the American social project is safety entails recognition. Recognition entails being centered in a way. Like, this is how I will make myself safe from attack, from abuse, from discrimination, from depredations, from and so I think that I say all of that to say, before even going into more direct conversation about this issue, I say that, I think it's we have to be fair to ourselves, and we have to recognize that, this has never represented this kind of issue for Muslims. Like, this was never an issue of like theology or law or interpretation of the Quran. This was always an issue of human beings being human. Human beings have stuff going on. The religion, the scripture, the tradition, the law, the theology, it always represented ideals, meaning like, this is what we feel is an ideal sexual, ideal sexual practice for people. This is the kind of sexual practice for people that God accepts. This is the kind of sexual practice that earns God's blessing. Now, outside of that, We know that many other forms of sexual practice exist. We know that many different constructions of identity exist, right? And I feel like when those two realities, meaning one being the ideal, right, the scripture, the ethos, that which makes us us, is allowed to remain intact, and when people who are challenging that are allowed to explore their own experience of being human beings, I really don't think we have these cataclysmic problems like this. It's not, it's only when those two are confronting each other that you begin to see, a lot of what we're seeing now. Summer, I'm looking. It looks like you want to chime in. I'm looking at your face. It's like I'm seeing an objection forming in your mind, or perhaps a comment. I'm interested though, because I don't want to talk too long without hearing from anybody. Bismillah.
I was Googling some of the words that you're saying. I was enriching my vocabulary.
SubhanAllah.
I think a thought that I was thinking about as you were talking, SubhanAllah, I was realizing, like, just humanizing, I think the danger is when we dehumanize a person, because then it allows us to become what we hate in terms of, marginalizing others, in terms of oppressing, being unjust, taking away rights that they still have, even from Allah. But I just remembered I was reflecting my internal transformation when I heard somebody who's a psychologist and also a very practicing Muslim, and said something along the lines of, in the mental health field, we need to acknowledge that people have attractions to same-sex individuals, or people from the same, just out of the Islamically defined sexual relationships, that their feelings are real, their love is real, their need for companionship is real. And being able to hold those different spaces of, like you said, looking at this is the relationship, this is a sexual relationship or practice that pleases Allah. But also in that process, realizing, like you said, that those other practices do exist and their feelings and, behind it are real. So that was just kind of the thought that I had in mind when I heard that. It made me kind of step away from just labeling and, just, labeling somebody within what we would consider maybe a sin or not pleasing to Allah practice, and dismissing all the other aspects of their experience.
I think this is very, very important. And I think that, when those two are colliding, I think everybody loses. I think the religion loses because, we're forced, or if we're not careful, we can allow ourselves to be forced to, as you were mentioning, complete erasure of people's existence, their experience, their humanity, right? The hand is forced. And I think what a lot of religious people are looking for is just the ability to say, I actually don't believe that such practice is pleasing to God. Right? That's all that's the language they're looking for. I actually don't believe that such practice is pleasing to God. But in its stead, they find these people are gross, these people are sick, these people are disgusting, these people are the scum of the earth. These people are, and it's like, when that happens, religion ends up losing one of its most important features, which is rahmah, mercy. That's what this is all. That's what this is all about. It's like mercy. I always say that, if someone, and see, I really think that a lot of this isn't the fault of the Muslim community. The Muslim community is lodged in between kind of a larger societal argument and just trying to articulate itself. But it's trying to articulate itself in a conversation in which we did not set the terms of the conversation. So it appears very clumsy, very awkward. But, we are living in a time in which you know, identity has become inclusive of so much. Like identity is this, very elastic construct, but it's also taken very seriously, right? So the person that says I'm gay or I'm a lesbian or I'm bisexual, they understand that part of their being in the way that I understand my being Black, right? That's how they understand that part of their identity. And just like somebody telling me it's haram to be Black, but keep repenting or something like that, that would offer me no solace. That would offer me no, I think accepting something like that, it's haram to be Black, right? Allah, it's kind of like, because when you say it's haram to be Black, you're not saying that I'm doing something haram. You're not saying I'm doing something that's displeasing to Allah. You're saying I am something that is displeasing to Allah. Attempting to live with that kind of dissonance, that kind of weight. I mean, I'm really, my heart goes out to anybody in that position, because to live with this reality that you've accepted for yourself. I mean, as far as people are concerned, perception is reality. So if you understand that to be that kind of part of your identity, and you understand that 24/7, you are displeasing to Allah, I think it can lead to great dismay, great confusion, especially if you believe God made me this way and I'm displeasing to God. It just, I think, I don't see how anybody's religious identity could survive, or anybody's religious commitment. Let's use a better word than identity. I don't see how anybody's religious commitment could survive under the weight of such dissonance. I mean, that's crushing. Let's get real here. I think a person in that position really only has two choices. Either I'm going to seek another interpretation of the religion, right? So that ethos, that center must be changed, or I'm probably going to leave the religion altogether. On the other hand, if I don't see my sexual attraction as, a part of my essential personhood, but rather something that I do, doesn't mean that it's not naturally, when I say it's something that I do, it does not mean that it does not naturally occur to me. These are very dense philosophical conversations. There can, my point in this, and I've written this, has always been to say, just because something is naturally occurring does not mean that human beings hold it to be a part of their essential personhood. Just because something is naturally occurring, it is still quite a selective and sometimes very discriminating process, choosing what is an essential part of your personhood. What is a part of you that cannot be dispensed with, right? I mean, hair naturally grows for some people, you know what I'm saying? But it is something that clearly can be dispensed with, right? Or a better example, and this example actually has a good parallel within our Islamic history, rationality, right? Rationality. For people who believed, no, the human being is inherently rational. Inherently rational. These were like the Mu'tazila. They said, so everything in our scripture, everything in our tradition must have a rational basis in order for it to be believed sincerely, because human beings are inherently rational. And this is where you have the big debate between the rationalists and the traditionalists, with Ibn Taymiyyah speaking on behalf of the traditionalists saying, there's lots of things that are natural to the human being. Laughter is natural to the human being. Why are you choosing a specific concretization, meaning an Aristotelian rationality, saying that this is the essential rationality that scripture must be reconciled with. No, that's not the case. Right? That's not true. Scripture doesn't have to be rationalized with that. There may be certain things in scripture that supersede our rationality, that are super rational, but faith can still accrue. We can still have faith because faith is a nurun yulqa fi qalb al-insan. So it's a light thrown into the heart of the human being. And they had debates about that. If someone in this debate, and this is what we need someone to, I think, make a similar, like the intervention that Ibn Taymiyyah made in the debate about rationality. We need somebody that is learned enough and qualified enough to make a similar intervention about sexuality. Wait, hold on. I'm not saying that these thoughts and feelings don't occur naturally. I'm sure they do occur naturally. I'm sure that they're very real. Why are you saying this is an essential part of your personhood that cannot be denied? There's lots of ideas, feelings that occur naturally, but you still see them, however you judge them, whether you judge them as acceptable, unacceptable, things you can act upon, things you shouldn't, you still view them enough apart from you that they can be judged. They can be judged. They can be assessed. They can be judged. If a person views sexuality in that way, that yes, it's something that occurs to me naturally, but it is not so much a part of me that it cannot be judged. It is not so much a part of me that, to act contrary to it would be obliteration of myself. It's a natural part of me, but a part of me that is still under the prerogative of God. That opens a whole world of possibility. A whole world of possibility is open. Okay, because if it's not who I am, but what I do, the idea that it's haram is like, okay, and that's why God is merciful. That's why we have grace. That's why we ask for forgiveness, because we are fallen. Because we are cracked vessels, because we do make mistakes, because we are overcome with uncontrollable urges, et cetera, et cetera. And, I could really make a case that, if the latter understanding is adopted, the existence of such persons within our community, without them attempting to shift our ideals, actually reminds us of the profound mercy of God. That, man, look, when we say Allah's rahmah encompasses all things, we have to do a gut check, and we have to say, so that gay brother in our community, that lesbian sister in our community, that does God's mercy encompass them as well? And the answer should be yes. It does. Of course it does. But in order for us to talk about God's mercy encompassing them from the perspective of the religious person, we have to at least acknowledge that it is an action that necessitates God's mercy. And that's all I think the religious community is looking for. That yes. I mean, we're not, we're trying to protect public decency, right? Yes, that's the job of a religious community. We're trying to protect public decency. So we don't want anybody shifting around, our ideals. We don't want anyone, moving the goalposts, as it were. But as long as those ideals, that what is represented by the Quran and the practice of Muhammad ﷺ are not tampered with, man, I'm content to let everybody be as human as they can, and to negotiate, their reality. And it's a very profound reminder that there are certain parts of existence that I don't understand, that I don't, I'm just a human being. I'm just a human being. My access to the wisdom of God and creating what he has created is limited, and so I think that, we're caught in a space Khalid had a question. So Khalid's question was, how did the Prophet ﷺ treat the homosexuals of his time, and how did they exist within kind of the Medinan framework? It's interesting. There was a community of cross-dressing males that would get together on the outskirts of Medina. They would wear women's clothing, and they would engage each other intimately. And the Prophet ﷺ was told about them. Somebody told him, on the edge of Medina, there's a community of cross-dressing men that wear women's clothes and engage each other intimately, you know. And the Prophet ﷺ actually mentioned the hadith that Allah despises men who wear women's clothes and women who wear men's clothes. That this is something that God despises. Then when asked, what is he going to do about it? The Prophet ﷺ decided to leave them alone. Leave them. There was no order given to raid their premises, arrest them, bring them to trial. He gave them, look at this prophetic clarity. He gave the moral lesson. And I mean, no, you know what? There's a lot in this. There's a lot in this statement. There's a lot in this statement. There's a lot in this statement. There's a lot in this statement, mashallah. The first thing is the Prophet ﷺ did not speculate about their intimacy, whether they actually engage each other sexually or not. You know, what was more demonstrable was that they were cross-dressers. That was something that you could see. Like if you go to this place where they congregated, you could see that they were cross-dressers, right? That they were queer in that they were non-conformant. If we were going to use the language of, you can see they were gender non-conformant. That could be seen. The Prophet ﷺ did mention a moral lesson about that this kind of non-conformity is displeasing to Allah. Allah does not like that. He did not ever speculate on the fact that they're sexually active with each other, that they have sex with each other, he never didn't even touch that. Then there's no mention of, let's go round them up, let's go prosecute them, let's go set them on fire, let's go throw them from a building, let's go and I really think that is the correct approach. As long as no children or anyone is being held against their will, no one's being harmed. These are people that are adults, consenting adults. Hey, our goal is to protect public decency, protect public morality. We are not hunting anybody down. There's no Salem witch hunt. We're not, let's go find them, bring them. Hey, there's a lot. There's a lot in the experience of people that, we don't understand. If it remains marginal, that is its place. Its place is at the margin. What I challenge is, I think there's something about Western culture that I think that there's not just something, I don't want to get sidetracked, but there's something about Western European culture, and by extension American culture, that not only is the margin a lonely place to be, I think in any society, the margin is a lonely place to be. It's like, there's not a lot of people like me. The margin is a dangerous place to be. The margin, that's the place where you get killed. That's the place where you get hunted. That's the place where you get executed, right? In our society, the margin, whether you're Black, whether you're a woman, whether you're disabled, whether you're a homosexual, whether you're a transgender person, whether you are a non-Christian person, right? The margin is a dangerous place to be. It's not simply a lonely place to be, or, it's a place where I don't have the benefit of tradition and scripture and cultural ideals. I'm just kind of like making my own way out here on the margin. No. And the margin is not like a place where, I don't really have churches. I don't have messages. I don't have ceremonies. I don't have parades. It's lonely. It's lonely at the margin, but it's not necessarily life-threatening. It's not life-threatening. It's lonely. It's lonely. It's like I'm out here, There's a lot that I don't have, but I'm figuring I'm within a culture that might not be welcoming of my difference, my alternative lifestyle. I exist on the margin, on the fringe of that culture. And it's just challenging that nobody is content to exist on the fringe of this culture where we are. I know this. I've read so much critical theory. I've read so much from activists, and I keep seeing the term centered, centering these narratives, centering these, because I think there's this, whether conscious or unconscious, I think there's this reality that being on the margin means dying. It means having your humanity devalued. So success is, no, not only am I in the center, I'm going to reshape the theology of the church while I'm in the center, reshape the whole culture. I'm, far from being marginal, I'm going to become the focal point, of the culture, which is, obviously people that are trying to adhere to religious tradition are going to take issue with that. It's like you're trying to now shift, the entire ethos. I mean, like, this was a weighty discussion, and I'm totally unloading from a day. I mean, look, I've been reading all day, so that's where the words are coming from. You know what I'm saying? I've been reading this is one of my first days, and I got a chance to sit back. I mean, I'm reading novels, I'm reading philosophy, I'm reading here. I've been reading all day. But when a person is wants to kind of reshape kind of the center, I mean, you get to a point where, and I think we're already at this point now, you're really talking about, okay, you begin talking about reality. Like, now we're making mutually exclusive claims on reality. That can lead to just a breakdown in culture. Now, like, and I think that, transgenderism and trans identity, as it's currently debated, it highlights that, people that, even if there's been no surgical reassignment, there's been no people that simply because their consciousness is dictating to them that they are of a certain gender identity, it has become my legal responsibility to acknowledge that, say, well, you are that, which is strange because, to use gender neutral language, I think would have been a much better compromise. And even though I understand both sides, people that want to be polite, people that are like, it's no big deal, right? Nowadays, somebody sends you an email, they have their pronouns at the bottom, you know what I'm saying? You're like, okay, it's no big deal. I mean, you're right, no big deal. On the other hand, I actually see the caution of people like Jordan Peterson and other people that are saying, if somebody is allowed to supplant my understanding of reality with their understanding of ideology, this is 1984 now we're like, I mean, this is George Orwell stuff, man. This is George Orwell. It's like, wait, hold on. It's like you're putting me in the pain chair, asking me how many fingers. You're asking Winston, is it 2 fingers? It's like, wait, hold on. I know what I see. And you want to, through force of law, tell me, no, this is what you see. I said, I don't see that. No, that's what you see. And if not, there will be penalties. We're getting, I think we're getting into just a dangerous place in terms of, a culture's ability, a civilization's ability to just remain cohesive in its understanding of itself when you get to that place. And that's why I said, using gender neutral language would have satisfied, look, you have an understanding of reality. I'm not going to force on you. All right. Even if I feel that my understanding of reality is supported by science, anatomy, blah, 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 blah. Again, I understand people that will say all of those fields are compromised. Science is racist, math is racist. It's like, whew, we're in look, I'm a Black American. I understand how science and mathematics have also been used to justify racial subjugation, which is really, the other part of this that is so sad is that because of that cardinal sin of the United States of America, racial subjugation, every other kind of, ostensible discriminatory practice is analogized with race. And, in America, once that happens, it's over. So I think, if I sound like a person that's thoroughly confused, it's only because I am. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's going to happen, man. It's anybody's guess, man. I will say as a final, I guess, statement before we kind of open the floor and just converse, we have to, in as much as we are capable, maintain our position of mercy, humanizing people, being kind to people. Just, I think it sounds very simple, but being kind to people, just treating people well, not, actually trying to model a community in which, we understand that sexual attraction is an important thing, but it's actually not our worldview that the sexual desire is the core essence of the human being. That's actually not our worldview, that, we actually judge people according to what they do in their bedrooms. No, we actually judge people according to what they do on their prayer mats. That's actually the truth of our worldview, that we're all servants of God, sexual practice being an incidental part of that. I know that in Western kind of the philosophical history of the West, sexual desire has come to occupy, a much different place in how we understand people. But we want to be those people that, and by this, we have to model that. That when I see somebody, I see two men, two women, I treat them kindly. I treat them respectfully because these are my brothers and sisters in humanity. I don't look and think, so who sleeps with who? That's not my view. I don't look at the world like that. I'm Muslim. I don't look at the world and say, okay, who's sleeping with who? And that will dictate to me how I should treat, everybody. No, that's not my worldview. I don't, laqad karamna bani Adam. Allah has ennobled all of the children of Adam. That's my worldview. That's what I go forth with. The fact that you feel the need to make something as secondary to your humanity as sex and sexual desire, primary to your humanity, I feel sorry for you. The fact that this is how you want to introduce yourself, which is odd to me. As someone, maybe I'm rooted in Islamic kind of history quite a bit because just the reading, but it's weird. It's still strange. It still strikes me as strange that when I meet some people for the first time, they lead with "I'm gay." Like, damn, because if anybody else talked about, and we're all adults on this call, I hope, but if anybody else, I met them and they talked about some detail of their sexual practice, I would find that very strange. I would even find that off-putting. If a person, I just met somebody, hey, how you doing? these are the sexual positions that I enjoy. What? Like I'm not interested in that actually, right? But I do realize that there's a particular inheritance that marginalized groups have in America that's how, if you want to be recognized and you want to be safe, that's how you got to come with it. You got to come with it straight out there in the front like that. And so I'm sympathetic because I realize that's their history. That's what you hear. That's what it means to be protected. That's what it means to be safe. You have to just come out straight out like that, right? Talk about that first. So it's like, that's not my worldview, but that is yours. In spite of that, I'm going to continue to, treat you like a brother or sister in humanity. I didn't ask you about who you had sex with, and I'm not even interested in hearing about who you have sex with or how you have sex or how I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that. However, in that, I do recognize there's also some critique in what I'm saying, right? There's major critique in what I'm saying, because you'll see now people campaigning for kind of the normalization of homosexual relationships. It doesn't matter who you love. You see, they don't say who you have sex with. See, I'm saying it doesn't matter to me who you have sex with, but it doesn't matter who you love, right? Clearly, I'm making a differentiation between who we love and who we practice sex with. That is also a part of my worldview, that a differentiation is made there. If I fall in love with someone to whom I'm not married, I cannot practice a sexual relationship with them. That I'm Muslim. That's what I believe. It's not just that loving someone is licensed to engage in an intimate relationship with them. No, intimate relationships are still subject to God's adjudicative gaze, right? Bismillah. I'll come to that in 1 second, right? So I think that's on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to maintain the integrity of our religion, man. We have to maintain the integrity of our religion, that, and not through obsession. That's the other thing too. Even though we have to fight it. We have to fight, guys. I'm not obsessed with homosexuality, man. I'm not obsessed with it. It has to be something that I could say in passing. And sometimes we have to sit at home because, given the context, we have to practice being dispassionate. Practice being dispassionate. Such sexual behavior is unacceptable in my religion. I'm not like foaming at the mouth. These nasty. I'm not insulting anybody. I'm not using any epithets. I'm not, such sexual practice. It's not permissible in my religion. That's it. That's all I'm saying. I mean, worshiping partners other than worshiping God along with anyone else is not acceptable in my religion. But I have neighbors that say that God has a son. I have some neighbors that say there's a multiplicity of gods. I have some neighbors that say there's no God. And I treat all of them with respect. I see, dignity in all of them. I see great humanity in all of them. Right? So it isn't an issue for me like that. Such actions, they're unacceptable in my religion. That's that. Now, what's telling is that when I say that, the other person's mind goes to, so you're dehumanizing them. You're saying they don't have a right to exist. I didn't say any of that. And if you were to ask me, I would correct you. I don't believe any of that. I told you what I believe. Such actions are not acceptable in my religion. That's what I believe. Okay, so we have two questions here. One is for Imran, and he said, oh, Imran, you sent the question to me privately. Do you want me to respond? Okay, bismillah. So he said, how do we educate a child who is asking the question about the homosexuality in society and in Islam while maintaining respect to God and his creation? You know, here, I think, kind of what we've been going over. I think you start with respect. You start with, I think, given the times and given the context, you start with respect. You start with human dignity, right? You start with respect. You start with human dignity. You start with the necessity of treating things with respect. You also, I think, in this discussion, talk about citizenship, what it means to be a neighbor, what it means to be a colleague, what it means to be a classmate, right? You start with those. And then you talk about, as Muslims, we actually believe that same right to be treated well, unless a specific circumstance dictates otherwise, extends to people that we disagree with. People that we strongly disagree with are still entitled to respect and good treatment. And then when talking about that, you start with Aqidah. You start with God, right? That even someone that said Allah is nothing, right? Even, the Quran says, لا تصبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله فيصب الله عدوا بغير علم. The Quran says, don't curse the deities that they worship besides God, right? So here, the Quran is saying, look, even the deities, even the gods, small g, they worship besides Allah, don't curse them, don't blaspheme those gods, right? Because if you did so, they would blaspheme Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to retaliate. So even with Aqidah, we're not disrespectful, we're not misanthropic. We're not people that hate humanity, and that's not who we are. But we can hold the position that people that we strongly disagree with are still worthy of respect. And if that is the case within how they believe in Allah, then it's certainly the case in what they do in their bedrooms, or certainly the case in how they express their gender identity. We disagree with them. Okay, let's move on. God is the one that will judge between all of us when we meet God. Let's move. I disagree with him. I don't think that's a moral choice. I don't think that's a moral choice. And that's all, right? I don't think that's a moral choice, right? And if you ask me, I'll tell you that. If you don't ask me, it's not even something that I see when I look at you. That's not what's on my mind. Is what your sexual practice is, right? Or what your question was specifically about homosexuality. It's not something that's on my mind when I see you. And I think that we'd want to maintain that if we could. And then Khalid, mashallah, asked, so how do we react when a cross-dresser shows up at the mosque in their opposite gender clothing to pray with your kids and a Facebook live stream on their phone? It's a very good question. And I think here we have to make sure that we make it clear to this person that what we're talking about now is just the administration of the masjid, right? If you wanted to go home and pray in those clothes, all I would say to you is taqabbalallah. May Allah accept. If you wanted to go, I mean, I don't, it's not that we see ourselves as fundamentally in a position to tell you how to negotiate your gender expression. I can't, that's something that and I'm actually very sensitive to transgenderism in particular, because we've met, very many people. I'm actually not in a position to tell you how to negotiate your gender identity and everything that entails. It entails much that I'm sure me as a person that has never had to deal with such issues and has no background in mental, health counseling or education, I would see myself as, grossly inadequate to really say anything to you about your gender expression. Because you're here, and you are here because you want to pray, I trust that you are a believer in Allah and His Messenger. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I trust that, it's in His trust. I trust that you're not here as a publicity statement, or I trust that you're not here to show how backward and retrograde Muslims are in their understanding of gender. I trust that you've actually come here to pray to Allah, and you've come here to experience some community. So, it would just be, okay, you have a right to come here because you are Muslim. This is the mosque, right? We don't want to be people of saddun an sabilillah. We don't want to be people of blocking the path of Allah. Certain aspects of our religious assembly are segregated according to gender. This was something I think you knew when you came here, right? We're going to have to figure out how we're going to administrate, right? How we're going to negotiate this, because you have, just like you have a right, everybody else also has a right. Everybody else, I'm assuming that, the women who are uncomfortable with you being in the women's section of the masjid, they also came for sanctuary. Now they disagree with you. And I think for the purpose of this, during this exchange, Khalid, I'm leaving out all considerations of halal, haram, right, wrong. This isn't the place for that. This isn't the place for that. We're talking about community. We're talking about, she came, to experience the sanctuary of the masjid and worship. You came to experience the sanctuary of the masjid and worship, right? Somebody, basically my approach, and ironically, Khalid, wallahi, I was in a situation like that in Arizona. And my whole thing was, okay, how can we get this done? Of course, a lot of religious folks, and we're all religious. That's what I was, even the person that was a trans woman that was at the masjid is also a religious person. We're all religious people. We're all religious people here. You had sensitivities and sensibilities that were very difficult to reconcile. And it was the women who were at the masjid who were saying, many of them very, very vocally, we're uncomfortable here. We're uncomfortable. We're not comfortable here. We're not comfortable here. And you had the trans sister that was saying, I'm not going to be comfortable praying anywhere else but here. I'm not going to pray in the men's section. I'm not going to pray in a section by myself. I'm not going to pray in the imam's office, right? I thought to make a strong statement to the community, I said, can you listen to the khutbah in the imam's office? And then as we start the prayer, you can come out and pray next to me with some space in between me and you can pray next to me because I'm the imam. I was the guest imam. I'm the khatib. You can pray right at the front with me. Right? Was inflexible on that. No. I will pray in the women's section or I'm going home. because I am a woman. At that point, the sister decided to leave. And what I found very endearing, and now I'm getting emotional as I'm thinking about it, is that you had people that you wouldn't expect, big bearded men, saying, no, I'm not telling you have to, saying don't leave. Nobody's saying that you have to leave. Nobody said leave. Nobody said leave. We have sisters that are uncomfortable. We want them also to be comfortable. You know, we even discussed, is there a way that we can arrange in the female prayer area with you being in them being in ranks in a different part of the female prayer area, you being in a different part. The sister said, no, I will pray in the ranks like every other woman, or I'm leaving. And at that point, it was just nothing that we could do. But I get emotional thinking about all of the conversation. I mean, Juma was delayed by about 45 minutes. All of the different conversation that we were having, just trying to accommodate, you know, our fellow Muslim. And, you know, it appeared that those attempts to accommodate our fellow Muslim didn't satisfy them. Didn't satisfy them. But I feel good knowing that we did try. We did try. And it wasn't about law. It wasn't about halal and haram. It wasn't about any of that. It wasn't about that. It was about the feelings and opinions of multiple community members. Because those, sisters that in the course of the discussion were labeled cisgender heteronormative sisters, they also have a right to be comfortable when they pray, right? They also have a right to be comfortable when they pray. That when it's like even if I agreed with everything that you're saying, and look, hey, I don't completely disagree. If somebody has, and I've actually read, a lot of what's interesting is that the Shi'i imams in Iran are actually much more forward thinking about this than a lot of Sunnis have been. But a lot of them say that, if a person undergoes reassignment surgery and they actually live, as the reassigned gender, that's what they are. That's what they are. And I think that, that's what no one can, what can you say about that? Right? That's what they are. This person was still transitioning and still phenotypically and outwardly still appear kind of at the beginning of at the earlier part of their transition. And that is what I think ultimately made some of the women in the prayer area uncomfortable, was how the person looked. I would even suggest to them now, if like I could talk to them again, because I never saw this person again, I would say, you know what? If you really want to do this, and this is who you are, I think the maslahah, the benefit, wear niqab. You come to the masjid, wear niqab. That's what I would say. I know some people like, Ubayd, you tripping. No, I would say wear niqab. You come to the masjid, wear niqab. It is not anybody's business to ask you about your gender. It is not your business to tell anyone, right? Wear niqab, come in, pray where you're comfortable praying, and that will really deal with that, right? Right, that will deal with that. That I really think that's the approach. Wear niqab, come in, pray. We don't have to deal with that, right? But this person was only wearing a headscarf, and I think, like I said, they were probably at an earlier stage in their transition, and the way they looked just made some of the women like, and it was a big thing. So I don't know. And now, because of COVID-19, everybody's gonna be wearing masks anyway. So bismillah. You know what I'm saying? Everybody have a mask on anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I think with stuff like that, I just think the overriding benefit is, and then I mean, to be honest, it would be even in that situation, if I were advising people from the very beginning, I would say it is completely inadvisable. And there is no precedent in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to ever ask an attendant of prayer about their gender. I've never seen that before. I've never seen anybody, in the prayer area asking, look, are you actually a woman? Are you a man? Look, they come, they have the clothing, right, that indicates, a certain gender expression. Don't ask anybody any questions. I actually got another call. And this call was the other way. It was from a masjid in Indianapolis. Good friend of mine said that there was a brother that had been praying there for 3 years, coming to Jummah every week, praying there. Nobody ever asked, are you, that wasn't a part of what was happening. That person would come, pray, leave. And come, listen to the khutbah, pray, leave, give some sadaqah, support some of the vendors at the masjid, had developed good relationships with people at the masjid, not relationships like outside of the masjid, but, a Jummah brother. Assalamu alaikum, you see a Jummah. They said that someone that knew them and knew that this was a woman that had transitioned to a man came to the masjid and saw them. Number one, the person didn't know that they were Muslim. It's like, number two, the person knew that this person had formerly lived as a woman. And so the person saw it as their divinely appointed duty to tell this to the imam and the community. And the imam called me right away. He's a good friend of mine. He said, what do you think about how I should handle this? I said, you tell that person. Don't tell anybody else. Don't mention that again. If they're uncomfortable, they can go pray elsewhere. Don't say anything to the person that's coming to pray. If it makes them so uncomfortable that this person that they knew as a woman is now praying on the men's side, then they shouldn't come. Don't come back to that masjid, but don't create a fitna where there is no fitna. This person comes to the masjid, they pray. People come to the masjid, pray with this person. There's never been any fitna. This has been 2 years. Why would we do this now? Why would we do this? That would be foolish. And that person was very angry with me, accused me of being a watered down scholar. I don't really know anything about it. I don't really know anything about Islam. I'm a fake imam. I sympathize with the LGBT community. I said, in spite of all of that, my position is the same. And alhamdulillah, the imam took my position. And to that brother's credit, he did not tell anybody. He didn't, he mentioned it to a few people privately. And so a little something began to percolate. But it was never like he jumped up and grabbed the mic after Juma. Hey, listen. It was, a few little whispers here and there. From what I understand, that Muslim that was coming to Juma that was identified was a little bit uncomfortable. But then after, a couple weeks, things died down. They continued coming to Juma like they had been coming to Juma for the previous 2 years. And I think that was the way that was supposed to be handled. And I don't ever think it's a good idea to go up to somebody and say, hey, are you a woman or a man? Where does that happen? How does that happen? Let me see what Khaled's thinking. Your opponent is a woman's fit, but we obviously wouldn't consider finding that logic. See, and this is what I'm talking about. See, Khaled, see. If you analogize with race, then we're okay. Because of course, that is America's cardinal sin. That everything that happens, if it's reminiscent of race, then no, actually, I do feel like any claim of anatomical difference in race is fake. Yes, I do think that there may be some differences. Some people can tell me maybe there's an infinitesimal difference in, I don't know, some characteristics, but I don't think those differences are the same biologically as the differences between men and women. I don't think the difference between, they're not the same thing. They're not, even if, I'm unable to define range of difference, I think it's very important that Muslims say that's not the same thing, right? The racial, it's not the same thing. Saying, this is a whites only masjid and saying this is the women's section of the masjid is not the same thing, right? That's not the same thing. Because if a person said and you do have this though, this is a men's only masjid, then I think that analogy would be more sound. But even then, it's just not the same thing. It's not the same thing, man. It's not the same thing. But yeah, I think, I think those women, but to your point, the women that were identified as cis hetero, I think they were wrong. I mean, leave this person alone, man. Leave them alone. They came to pray. If you're uncomfortable, you leave. Right? I mean, the person, now it's different if the person is back there like in a suit and tie or something like that. See, this is where, there's an optic part to this that is really interesting. If the person is, but this person in Arizona, they had on a jilbab and they had on a hijab. At that point, I think nothing was supposed to be asked. Hey, because and then too, life is interesting. I've actually met people that were not intentionally gender nonconformists, nor were they homosexual, but you could mistake them for someone of the opposite gender. Just how they looked. You could mistake them and think. And this is why it's never advisable to ask somebody that. That's just, I think socially you'd expect people to know that to ask somebody in the men's washroom coming out of a stall, wait, are you a man? That you just don't do that. You just don't do that. There's no, I can't see any reason that a person would have to do that, but these women, maybe not really being primed and prepped, just reacting to what they saw. Hey, that's a man. That is a man in the women's prayer area. And it just went, it just got way out of hand. Whereas in that second situation, the person didn't start screaming in the masjid. The person just mentioned to the imam, hey, brother Abdullah that comes kind of small frame, that is a woman. I knew her. I grew up with her. That is a woman. And the imam was able to just keep that quiet. No, we're not going to deal with that. Keep that quiet. We're not about to create a situation here. We're not about to do that. We're not about to do that. No. If you're uncomfortable, there's other masajid. There's other places you can go, but don't do that. Do not do that. Do not do that. And that's what my advice was. Other questions, ideas, comments? We have about 10 minutes left.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
First is kind of theoretical. So Eric and I were talking once and we were saying how like most prohibitions in Islam are like can be rationalized, even if they don't have to be, but like make sense to us because they either prevent harm to the individual or prevent harm to others.
Mhm.
And this seems like a situation where the harm posed is not as much as you would say like drinking, for example, or adultery or what have, like the risks just don't seem to be as much there, especially like to the broader community. Like they're not bringing necessarily harm to anybody. So that's
Are you talking about homosexuality or transgender identity?
all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can speak to what you think, like, is there an underlying wisdom there on that point? Number one. Number two, and kind of on this, trailing on the practical implications of this, I struggle with the whole, okay, obviously we respect and honor the humanity and nobility of all persons. However, when it's thrust into our personal, our homes, our families, our friends, like at what point does it become an endorsement, like an impermissible endorsement of something? Let's say, for example, a friend of mine is gay and is getting married. Like, am I allowed to go to their wedding? I'm looking for a roommate. Like, I'm a woman. Am I allowed to live with someone who is sexually attracted to me that identifies with the same gender? Am I allowed to live with a transgender woman who, so like, I guess there are lots of like practical questions in one, and even like my own child, for example, if they came out to me, I mean, obviously I would always start from a place of, I love you, I respect you, like nothing would ever change that. But then at what point does like respect become tacit acceptability and endorsement of this behavior?
No, very much so. Very probing questions. To the first point, I think that, one has to, yes, mashallah, very, very good question. Alhamdulillah. I think with the first question, Islam, as I think in contradistinction to Christianity, is a sex positive religion. Islam is a sex positive religion. And so Muslims are not agnostic or not Muslims have no problem acknowledging the influence of sexuality. Sexuality is a tremendous influencer of human behavior of different kinds. This is, like whenever you see gender segregation, or you see men and women dressing modestly, or you see men and women that aren't married to each other engaging each other with kind of respectful distance, etc. All of that is about acknowledging the power of sex. Like all of that is about acknowledging that sexual attraction is a powerful force, and it can when sexual attraction is practiced and carried out in different ways, that can completely alter kind of the makeup of society. Like sex is a big deal. I guess what I'm saying in layman's terms, sex is a big deal. You know what I'm saying? Is it? And so if sex, for instance, starts occurring outside, which is going to say, let's say sex between men and women starts occurring outside of the bond of marriage, right? Something like that. Because, two people that are having a sexual relationship outside the context of marriage, that are consenting adults, both of them of sufficient age where they can make choices about their bodies and what they want to do. The fact of the matter, and I'll speak to this. I know it's unpopular nowadays, but I'll speak to it. I don't care about what's unpopular. I'm more interested in truth than popularity. I'm African American. I'm Black. Upwards now of I heard 70 and one statistic, I heard 80% of Black children are born outside of wedlock, right? Now, the people that had those relationships to produce those children, one could argue, and I think even more compellingly so, it was just private persons engaging in intercourse. What's harmful about that, right? They're just two people making a social choice to have sex with each other. But the long-term lasting effect that the outcome of those sexual relationships has had on society, we all can feel that. Now, in the case of a homosexual relationship, the prospect of child rearing or childbearing is not there. But the idea that becoming a customary practice, something accepted, would not have a drastic impact on society, I think is just naivety and unacceptable oversight. Like, if that happens, just like the shift from sex occurring inside of marriage to outside of marriage, there's going to be an effect to that. You're going to see an effect. Right? Yes. You're going to see, there's going to be some impact there. Sex occurring between people that we would assume could, be in locker rooms together, or, because, and see, that's the other thing. A lot of people completely, I think, misplaced the significance of the conversation of people being same-sex attracted in the military. Because the sexual attraction is very important. It's very powerful. It has tremendous influence. We also look for spaces where sexual attraction is not a thing. This is why incest is almost universally regarded as something detestable, because that my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my sister, my relationship with my aunt, is supposed to be a relationship that does not include any room for sexual attraction. If there is some there, that would completely alter those relationships in a way that I think all of us view as troubling and strange and unfortunate and something we would all want to avoid. Similarly, if now, spaces where we counted on certain kinds of camaraderie is now replaced with romance, like in the military, we're all, serving in this capacity, but now you have certain people that are lovers within that, it would just radically change, drastically change, those relationships. So I think the wisdom that I'm trying to speak to here is that, although I haven't sat down and if I did, I would only be hypothesizing the potential harm, I'm at least very comfortable saying I know that there would be a drastic change. There is something changed when two men decide to have sex as opposed to a woman and a man having sex. In the same way, there is something changed when people that are married decide to have sex as opposed to people who aren't married decide to have sex, or people that aren't related decide to have sex as opposed to people who are related deciding to have sex, even though in every scenario I just gave, those persons might be consenting adults. It's just there's much tied to that we might not even be able to define or quantify. In the case of gender expression, I actually agree with you. I think, gender expression is, I think, a much more complex conversation. I think in the case of gender expression, the one thing that confuses me is we talk about gender fluidity, but wouldn't transition imply gender rigidity? See, I don't, it's almost like if gender is really fluid, why would there, meaning like, if gender is fluid in the way that some people talk about gender, why would there ever be a need to change one's gender? You would just be a different kind of man or a different kind of woman. Okay, if a person is anatomically and neurologically, male or female, but then, and I'm talking about, their cells, right? But they do some things differently than other people. They're non-conformant in that way. Why would there ever be a need to? Okay, you're non-conforming and you're different, but the transition implies that no, you recognize there is some essential masculinity that you are trying to realize through, changing, your sexual organs, or some essential femininity that you are trying to realize through changing your reproductive organs. So, but if a person kind of practically has that going on, I don't know what I would say. I would, don't stop believing. And if a person, makes a decision to live with a certain gender identity, I would hope and pray that they can do so with faith as a part of that identity as well. I would definitely warn them against making a rash or hasty decision about something like that. And then to your last point, because I know we've run out of time, and we might need to, mashallah, I said we had 29, 30 people today, so this was a hot topic. We might need to kind of pick this back up. I would also say that, we don't be so concerned about tacit approval. A person can stand their ground in love. You can stand upon truth in love. That's not it. It sounds harder to do than it maybe actually is. Actually, to be able to be there for someone while they know you don't agree with them. Actually, someone very close to me, their son left Islam. He decided to renounce Islam. A decision that they didn't agree with, but that did not mean that they would not have lunch with the person or talk to the person or express their love and concern for the person. The person knew that they disagreed with this decision to renounce Islam. I think this is terrible, and I'm here for you. I don't know what you're thinking, but I don't agree with that. And I think that we can hold that space as well. But we run out of time. Inshallah, we'll pick this back up. We're not done with this, inshallah. We're not done with it. We'll pick this back up, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Ameen ya rabbal